Spring. Good tidings all around. First of all, we have Sam Adams Summerale has been released once again upon the world. That is marvelous. But just as importantly, Dark Souls 3 is upon us. And if you can't tell, I'm quite excited. And so is my character. Check him out. Yeah, Dark Souls 3. Woo! So, this video, I'm just going to be kind of bullshitting and talking about what I hope to see in Dark Souls 3. I am completely in the dark, at least as much as I can be, about the full game. Seen some stills and a bit of the opening cinematic and whatnot, but other than that, I really don't know shit. So, this is going to be a bit dated by the time this comes out. It'll be a couple weeks old, I imagine, but it should be rather relevant, especially to those of us who still haven't, kept track with the Japanese release and that sort of thing. So, I guess I'll just get right down into it and talk about what I hope to see in Dark Souls 3, what I hope they improve upon from the last couple of games, what I hope they bring back that wasn't in the game I'm playing right now, Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin, and all that good stuff. Maybe I'm going to switch to this Eagle Knight shield just for matching the armor purposes, because I'm a fucking OCD maniac when it comes to that. Also wearing Alpha armor because it looks pretty close to what's in Dark Souls 3, and I want to, get a bit of that. So, Dark Souls 3, slated to come out in a few days by the time this comes up. I'm a veteran of the both Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 2. There's, in fact, a full playthrough of the latter, the Scholar of the First Sin version, on this channel. All the DLC, all that good stuff. Played the first version on Xbox 360, and then played on PC when it came out. Played Dark Souls 1 several times through, by now, across both Xbox 360 and PC, with the Dark Souls Fix mod, obviously, because it's fucking a terrible port without it. So, I have a bit of, grounds to say what I want and what I don't want. I've personally not played Bloodborne nor Demon Souls, but the other guy on this channel, Ashton, he has played Bloodborne on a friend's PlayStation 4, so he's a bit more familiar with that, and from what I understand and what he's told me, I have a little bit of insight on that as well, though not nearly as much as he does. Dark Souls 3 is using the Bloodborne engine, so it'll have quite a bit more relationship with that game than even this game does to it, so I find that pretty interesting. Bloodborne was developed simultaneously with Dark Souls 3. There was two teams handling it and as it turns out, Miyazaki, because he was on the main creator of the Dark Souls universe and Demon Souls, let's just say, he's like the man when it comes to that. He's like the Gaben of Dark Souls. He was not a part of Dark Souls 2 development. Rather, he was working on Bloodborne that entire time, which is why this game turned out to be so different than Dark Souls 1. At a glance, it's like, well, it's the same shit, but it really isn't. It's a completely different beast. Having played through New Game Plus on 4 times, New Game twice, New Game Plus twice, and then all the DLCs once, I can say for certainty that this is a very different beast than Dark Souls 1. And some things are good changes, some things are not so good. And I'll highlight what I want to see brought forth and what I want to see change in the new game. So, coming from Dark Souls 1 into this game, I could definitely tell there was a difficulty change. This game was not nearly as punishing as Dark Souls 1. And yet, the times that it was punishing, I felt at a loss a lot of the times. When it came to Dark Souls 1, there was just some points of utter frustration. But when it came down to it, for the most part, especially on the base bosses, I had some trouble playing the DLC this first time around, if you watch those videos. But for the most part, it was all systematic, and it came down to the player's fault. It was all trial and error, and if you were, attentive enough and gave it enough tries, you will overcome it through skill, if you, just give it your all. With Dark Souls 2, although, the base enemies, and I felt like a lot of the bosses were easier, the times that were tougher, it felt like you died from plain bullshit, or just from a lack of creativity. And I think that's what really sums up this game in a nutshell. The DLCs I was spectacularly impressed with, but for the most part, the base game I was very much not impressed with. The main bosses left me wanting a lot of the times compared to what I experienced in Dark Souls 1. For the most part, the main bosses on here were just large humanoids wielding large weapons, or some variation to that extent. I'm more of a... Jesus, these guys are wrecking me. I'm more of a fan of beasts. I always have been in these type of third-person action games, and I guess some of that carries over from me playing God of War on PlayStation 2 and God of War 2. But I really like these ginormous beasts, and even if they're not ginormous, I just like having, going up against something that just doesn't seem fair. That seems like you're gonna have to put in, all of your effort to be able to even overcome, and that just didn't seem the case with this game. For the most part, they were. What the hell did I do that for? They were just large humanoids. You have like Velstadt, you have the Fallen Giant, the Last Giant, you have the Giant Lord, which is the Fallen Giant in the past. You have Vendrick, which was kind of a weirdo. My favorite bosses in this game were stuff like the Ancient Dragon, what was it called? The big singing frog thing. Those I really enjoyed because they were just so different. They were so strange and just something that no one, that I hadn't really experienced before, even though, there was plenty of those type of weird creatures in Dark Souls 1, but they were a lot more creative. So that's what I really like to see. And on top of just the lackluster story, not that, the stories in Dark Souls are never handed to you on a silver platter. You have to go searching for them. But it was really just it felt like a fan fiction of Dark Souls 1. And that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I very much did enjoy Dark Souls 2. But it just didn't leave that same kind of holy shit effect, upon me. It wasn't one of those killer experiences that I'm going to die from this motherfucker. That left me thinking, this is a life-changing game type of thing. It just, compared to its predecessors, it just very much felt like it was stuck in its shadows. I hope because Miyazaki's back on Dark Souls 3 that they don't do that they are much more aware of their situation, that they try to create something unique and different. Yet keeping with the core mechanics that everyone loves from the Dark Souls universe. And I feel like they tried that with Bloodborne. And, to a lesser or greater extent in some things, they succeeded in some areas and failed in others. But, or not necessarily, not that they failed, but they didn't do as good of a job on some areas, just from what I understand. So I hope they've learned their lessons, both from a game design perspective, both, in actual gameplay, and, oh god, I forgot about this. All this shit's different in Scholar. And engine perspective. Come on, you motherfucker. But I'm really banking on the fact that it's, an entirely different development team, that all those things that were kind of growing pains in Dark Souls 2 won't even be a factor in 3. So that's the hope, at least, and I guess we'll just have to wait and see how it turns out. Some of the specific game design things I really enjoyed in Dark Souls 1 that didn't carry over to Dark Souls 2, I found that wasn't such a big deal. What I found was a bigger deal was the things they replaced them with. So soul memory in this game was kind of broken. Like, to me, it's not a big deal because I don't PvP that much. What I do when I do PvP, it's, very uncompetitive. Do it just to max out Covenants and the stuff that I want to do for fun. But, some people take that shit seriously, and I understand that. That's a big part of the game to them. Dwarf required a head. And having that soul memory mechanic where, enemies start disappearing if you kill them too many times in a row, having the bonfire, the human effigy, bonfire aesthetics, all those mechanics working the way they do, it kind of destroys the balance that Dark Souls 1 had with PvP. Although the actual mechanics in PvP, fighting someone, I feel like is greatly improved in this game. So, they kind of improved in some areas and absolutely just took 10 steps backwards in others. And like I said before, that's just kind of this game in a nutshell to me, overall, in like every respect. Whoosh! Love the sun sword. It's a piece of crap, but it's it's fun to use. So I'm hoping, as far as that goes, we go straight back to Dark Souls 1 as far as enemy placement, that they don't respawn, that you don't have to worry about, you know, increased hollowing. And I know for a fact hollowing's gone because the lore in the game, you're in like an Age of Ash where the mechanics of the first two games don't really carry over. So it doesn't appear that your health decreases or anything of that sort. So I think we're kind of back to square one on that. And that mechanic also seemed to work just fine in Bloodborne because let's face it, a lot of the times losing those souls is crucial enough. Like there doesn't need to be any added difficulty on top of that. That really should be your punishment. Especially if you're using equipment that scales based on soul count, and a lot of people, you know, towards the end game do that. Now, I'm not one of those people, but I just felt like in this game they were really out of touch with what difficulty really meant. I feel like a lot of the stuff they put in was just, I don't know, I don't want to say bullshit, but a lot of it was. Like, a lot of it was just straight up another round of difficulty just for the sake of having it, rather than actually expanding upon the gameplay that was there and making it more interesting. And that was its biggest fault, I feel like, is they just added stuff for the sake of adding stuff, and it just didn't really add up. I'm going to go over here to the Lost Bastille, because I don't think I've killed the pursuer down there, or the several pursuers, whatever, that show up in this certain area. Good stuff. Also carrying over from Dark Souls 1 and to some extent Bloodborne. Oh no, I don't want to leave those. I want to use that. I also hope they bring back the art style a little more in line with how it was in the first game. I love the art style in this game. A lot of people don't, though. I do enjoy it. I feel like it definitely fits what this game went for. But compared to what they showed at E3, what it was going to be, this dark, like, almost monotone, where, you know, look where you had to use a torch in some areas or else you simply would not be able to navigate them, it was a far cry from that. And I feel like a lot of people were let down. And you can't blame them. I was definitely one of them. When I first saw it, I was like, well, this is certainly disappointing. There's one of the pursuers that I was looking for. And it was one of the bigger instances of the E3 bullshot that, you know, showed us something and didn't end up translating to real game. So I hope, instead of going for this, I don't want to say don't make the game pretty, because this game was pretty in its own way. Dark Souls 1 was pretty in its own way. Dark Souls, or Bloodborne, is, you know, kind of a gloomy pretty in some ways, you know, at high fidelity graphics. But I want them to go to more of that bleak, not so high fantasy route. I feel like this graphic style is more akin to something like The Witcher. You know, not exactly, you know, this isn't a great comparison, you know, apples to apples, but, oh, what the fuck? Nice. Dogs. Oh, perfect. Curse. Why not? This is going to hell in a handbasket. Dead. Perfect. But I want them to use a more neutral color palette. You know, I'm the kind of person, if you're playing this kind of dark, sultry game, I want the atmosphere to match it. And I feel like that was the thing they really got lost in translation between Dark Souls 1 and 2, is that atmosphere that they had crafted in 1. You know, there were some parts that were absolutely gorgeous looking. I mean, even like right now running in with the Dark Souls Fix mod, full 1080p and all that stuff, like, I'm gonna use this bad boy. You know, Lordran looks fantastic. Anor Londo looks gorgeous. The caves look amazing. But, there's still that depressing, like, hope is lost type of setting, and that's really what the game wants, you know, I feel like wants to be conveyed in. And this is not that whatsoever in Dark Souls 2. It's a, you know, it's a much more stuff isn't as destroyed or as decrepit. It doesn't feel like the gods have abandoned you type situation, and that's what I want to feel in Dark Souls 3, just like I felt that in Dark Souls 1. And I'm getting fucking raped with this. I forgot that it's more about weapon, damn. It's more about weapon weight than your own player weight in this game. I'm coming from Dark Souls 1, so I'm all kind of fucked up. If you look at this game, even across the DLCs, it's just like, it feels too pretty. You know what I mean? Like, the colors are too vibrant for their own good. I just don't feel threatened. And like I said a minute ago, that is one of the biggest problems with this game in general. It's just not that threatening. It doesn't have that oh shit vibe that Dark Souls 1 does, and I really want to see that come back in 2. Also more akin to Bloodborne, I'd like to see, and it's my understanding that they are bringing this about, a larger weapon moveset for all the weapons. I do really like the idea of having the weapon art. Same for magic as well, because at the end of the day, a lot of these weapons across both Dark Souls 1 and 2 operate generally the same. I mean, you got a few short swords or long swords or whatever that have different weights and maybe a different power attack or whatnot, but at the end of the day, they pretty much operate like a sword or an axe, you know. Oh, I ran right into that shit. So, there's not a huge differentiation between the two. It's not going to make a big, that big of a deal whether you use one over the other. And I feel like with the weapon art and the special move sets, it absolutely does. And that was definitely shown in Bloodborne. So I'm going to leave him alone for a while. I'm not up to the task right now of killing him. But at that expense, you have to, at least in Bloodborne, they had to shorten the weapons list. There was only, hell, I don't even know, I didn't play the game, but there was not nearly as many weapons. I mean, let's scroll through this. Of course, there's some duplicates that I need to get rid of, but, I mean, look at all those weapons. That's ridiculous. I don't use, a tenth of them. There's a few that I'll go between. I've made boss weapons because boss weapons are super easy to make in this game compared to Dark Souls 1. But there's just such a huge variety. But like I said, there's not a huge advantage picking one over another as far as straight moves go. Really, it's dictated by scaling. It's dictated by, scaling between stats. It's dictated by the kind of materials they have to use, what type of damage they do, and there's a little bit of variety in that sort of speaking, but for the most part, a sword's a sword, an axe, pole arm's pole arm. So it doesn't make a huge difference. And the same with pyromancies and magic, except I feel like you're even more punished when using those because there's really not that much of a difference between a lot of them, except for power. You can get your casting time down a little bit, that sort of thing. But for the most part, they're pretty identical. Oh my god, I am so garbage today. Don't drink in Dark Souls, kids. And the biggest handicap with the magic is that the, you're capped on how many times you can use them. And that kind of made sense in Dark Souls 1. It was a rudimentary way to get around it. Of having people, especially in PvP, spam something and getting to where they can just, use overpowered spells non-stop. Because, I mean, imagine if you had Infinite Firestorm, it would be super easy to go through and just cheese the entire thing. And some people do with Firestorm, and people did in Demon Souls with Firestorm. That was like the OP spell to have, so I understand why they limited it, but it's my understanding that they're going to a Magicka type system, as in like you have your own, or mana, whichever you want to call it. If you're an Elder Scrolls, fan like I am, you call it Magicka. So I'm happy about that. I hope they make some more unique changes to the magic system because of that as well. The only way I know about the mana system is I read like 2 sentences about it, and I saw that your character now has a blue bar between the green and red bar. So that's pretty cool, and I hope that encourages me to use magic more, because basically my Dark Souls strategy is to get, my melee up as far as possible at first. Why did that thing like land? Jesus Christ. Wow, I've never opened that up. I'm a fucking pro. I played through New Game Plus, and I'm not done DLC or anything. I guess I'm not even talked to him. Can I give it to him, or I'm just... Okay, whatever. I won't ask. Let's see, I've already got all this shit. Ujikatana. But I'm hoping Dark Souls 3's new system will encourage me to try out magic earlier on. Not necessarily, you know, make it my central stat or anything, but at least encourage me to use it more from the start than I did. And especially, you know, using pyromancies and that sort of thing from the get-go. But we'll have to see. I don't know. If it actually calls out to me and I want to use it, I'll try it out. But my plan is to go, you know, sword and board and pick up some stuff along the way if it absolutely seems that necessary. We'll see. As I said earlier, I wasn't the biggest fan of the story in this game. It felt like, and it really, to a certain extent, really was just an homage to Dark Souls 1. It had a lot of fallbacks, a lot of connections that just basically made old Dark Souls 1 players say, oh, that's cool, I really like that part, I'm glad they expanded upon it. But at the end of the day, as its own game, it just doesn't stand up on its own. If you separated this from Dark Souls 1, it just wouldn't be that great, nor that big of a deal. And for most games, that wouldn't be such a big of a deal because, you know, a lot of story games fall back on their predecessor to make sense, to, you know, follow a certain story or good, got me some bone dust, a certain plot, but where this isn't a continuous plot, where time doesn't even make sense in this universe, they can't really get by with that. You know, this isn't going from Halo 2 from Halo 1 to Halo 2. This is basically like, you don't even know if you're in an alternate timeline, and everything is just a big reference to Dark Souls 1. All the main bosses across the DLC, across the main game, are merely fragments of Manus, who I just killed in the DLC of Dark Souls 1. That's really what it comes down to. The entire premise of this game, at least the base conflict in this game, is that all the fragments of Manus, who is the father of the Abyss, who was the furtive pygmy, all those fragments developed into women who seek the throne of different kingdoms and ruined all these different kingdoms, which included, is it Tasha's name? What the fuck's her name? Nadalia is one of them. I don't remember. I'm in the middle of combat. I can't think right now. The main boss in Dark Souls 2. That's pretty bad. I can't even think of her fucking name. And all the queens across all the DLCs, you know, they are just fragments of this one boss you fight, who is the big bad guy in the DLC for Dark Souls 1. And it's just like, it's there to make the previous players say, oh, that's cool, and I feel like that's really it. The other bosses, everything else, there are pretty much, references to Dark Souls 1. You know, the Rotten and stuff is nothing more than like Nito. All these other bosses have oh yeah, I gotta burn it, that's why, that's what it is. All these other bosses, that, oh, I can't, it's +5 only, damn, that's rough. All these other bosses that like have the souls of Dark Souls 1 bosses, such as I think the old Iron King has Gwyn's, that sort of thing. It's all just screams like it's a cheap cop-out to me. And that's not necessarily a horrible thing if they just did that intermittently, but it was pretty much the entire game was just, look at me, we're making some references. Aren't we cool? Aren't we nice to do that? So I feel like it just, as its own game, it doesn't have a story to stand on. And not that you should be playing Dark Souls games for the story alone. It's about the challenge. It's about the difficulty. It's about the atmosphere. But it's so deep. It has such a cool system, such a cool lore behind it, that I feel like you're you're missing out if you don't at least dive in a couple layers into Dark Souls lore. Because there's some cool shit here. I think, as a huge universe, the Elder Scrolls universe has some really good storytelling, but as far as complexity goes, as far as hidden layers, allowing the player to make his own conclusion and not necessarily be right or wrong about some of these things, this is the universe. Like, there is some really cool shit to be found. Good old Executioner Chariot. I haven't faced him on New Game Plus. Probably died to him too. This has been nothing but me fucking dying. It's pretty bad. So I feel like they really need to continue the passion that was put into Dark Souls 1 as far as backstory and all that cool shit goes, because otherwise I just feel like there's just a huge missed opportunity, and I think that's the better way to treat longtime fans of the franchise, is introducing more cool story elements and, you know, subtle hints and characters and that sort of thing, rather than, hey, look, these guys are just duplicates of all those other fucking dudes you've already fought in the last game. Aren't we edgy? So that was probably like my overall biggest gripe with this game. Some people didn't care for the movement model very much and that sort of thing, and I agree, it is definitely floaty. Oh god, I didn't think I was out there that far. But you know, I didn't have much of a problem with that. I didn't care for how the leveling worked, just like some people didn't. It's, you know, I'm like level 233 right now, which is fucking ridiculously high compared to what you can get to in Dark Souls 1. And this armor is way too light, does not have any poise for what I'm doing here. So yeah, I just want to see them go back to basics on some of this stuff. I'm fine with innovation, just you know, improve, but don't. I feel like they took some steps back, as a lot of people probably agree. So some of that comes down to personal preference, but I feel like a lot of it is just merely objective game design. Hopefully I can get to this bastard before. I need to find him. There you are, you bastard. Okie dokie. And get to the lever now. There we go. We're doing just fine. Now we wait. I was trying to look for him and could not fucking see him. Double drink. Oh, arrow got me. Are you shitting me? Alright, well, it's apparent I shouldn't be fighting bosses on this fucking bullshit discussion video. I'll just go back to somewhere else and kill a bunch of stuff. Just as important as the game design elements as far as gameplay goes, I think the biggest thing they need to bring back is the amazing world layout they had in Dark Souls 1. It was so connected. It was so three-dimensional. It was just crazy. I'm not going to kill you yet, but I really probably should. Move path. Oh, yeah, that's right. What a bitch. No need for miracles. You invade me, so I'm just going to go ahead and kill you. Oh, she is super fucking... I don't care. I'm going to go for it. In Dark Souls 1, everywhere was connected to everywhere in some way, and it was fucking incredible. Like, you know, it was just insane to me the way that Blighttown, New Londo, Lordran, the Undead Burg, the Parish, everything was within walking distance, and you could pretty much see everything from everywhere, even though they looked like they were a million miles away, or that there was no way they could be possibly connected. Yet they did it in a way that made perfect sense, and that was an amazing achievement to me, and something that was most certainly missed in this game, because this world layout is nothing but a big spider web, really, and not an impressive or necessarily logical one at that. I'm going to skip her as well. I need to focus if I'm going to be going with this shit. I'm using pretty shitty equipment, too, just for the sake of Fashion Souls. You know, some of the shit, like, you went from an elevator going up onto a plane of lava, like to the Iron Keep. It made no sense in some of these places. You had some really pretty looking locales like here in Majula and Hyde's Tower with all the water and stuff, but it didn't really have that awe-inspiring effect of going from, you know, one place to another, going to the top of the, oh yeah, he's coming as well. Going to the top of Sin's Fortress and then being taken by bats up to Anor Londo, being able to, you know, teleport back. All that shit just, it did not have that awe sensation. And because you didn't have bonfire warping until later on, that sort of integral world design was a lot more necessary in this game, and I kind of feel like the warping from the beginning was a necessary, not really cop-out, but just like if they didn't have warping in this game, it would be impossible. Not to mention that you have to level up from one NPC, which I hope to God is gotten rid of in Dark Souls 3. I don't know why, of all things they brought back from Demon Souls, that was one of them. I don't know who the hell, like, asked for it or thought that was a good game design or whatever, but I'm certainly not one of them. These guys are pricks, dude. Come on. So, I hope the world is a lot more three-dimensional, a lot more meaty, and it doesn't just feel like a bunch of concept art strung together in a big spider web. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is some fantastic looking places. I mean, the Tower of Flame is gorgeous. The skybox looks amazing. Surroundings look cool as shit. This is some really nice architecture and that sort of thing. Hell, this might be, you know, Anor Londo flooded. They kind of make it seem that way with Ornstein right there, but either way, it's a beautiful locale, but it just doesn't really make sense going from here to some of the other locations. It just doesn't make sense how they're, you know, related. So I hope they bring back that sense of just an amazingly interconnected world. And besides that, that's really all I can think of as far as technical-wise gameplay. Everything else that I really have concerns about is engine and art. So from what I've seen, armor art, weapon art, and I mean like the actual way it looks, you know, texture design, you know, game models, all that thing, looks fantastic. The environment has never looked better or more high res. Not that that's a huge achievement with some of the, you know, low res models of stuff that's in the distance on some of these games, but they look better than ever. They look fantastic. Like, there were some examples in Bloodborne that did make me say, holy shit, that is really pretty. That even looks better than Scholar of the First Sin. And being the Bloodborne engine, I understand how they were able to, you know, bring that over, which is nice. But I want to use a bigger sword here because I'm getting kind of destroyed using this thing. Lightning Bastard Sword. Here we go. So, I'm really impressed with what I've seen. I've seen, like, an Ashen Castle that looks amazing. I've seen just some of, like, going by the walls and some dungeon-looking areas. They look fantastic. All the armor I've seen looks mind-blowing. The weapons are, you know, do service. They look, you know, just from the compressed videos I've seen, short videos I've seen, they are even more detailed than this and look appropriate in that game's lighting. The one issue I'm having right now with the art style with this translation to the Bloodborne engine, and I don't know if this is just in a beta build. I think it's in the final build, though, from what it looked like in the Japanese release of the PlayStation 4 version. But it looks like as if the icons for all the equipment, your health and stamina and magic, they look really simplified compared to this game and even Dark Souls 1. My favorite HUD look is Dark Souls 1 because it's like, this one is kind of overly fancy looking to me. Like, you would see like the decorative looking edges and borders and all that stuff. I mean, it looks nice and it fits the game world. I'm not saying that, but it's just like, the simplicity was where it was at to me on Dark Souls 1. But I feel like they've gone too simplistic and too Metro looking. Like, this was too medieval, high fantasy looking, and Dark Souls 3 is too simplistic looking. Like, the other one having that age look, I don't know how to describe it, but it fits the world perfectly. So I don't know why they went with that change. I'm hoping it looks better in game and it grows on me more. But right now it's too avant-garde. Or no, this is too avant-garde and that one's too metro for me. So I don't know. Maybe it'll make sense the longer I'm there. I don't know why they couldn't have just got rid of, like, you know, this has like a grainy filter over everything, which I like. But, you know, if they wanted to get rid of that, I don't know why they couldn't just kept the old-fashioned looking borders in a more high resolution and higher detail version. But that was the looks like the way they're going forward. So maybe it'll grow on me. I just don't think it really fits the way the game looks. It would have made more sense to put that look into this game and vice versa. You know what I mean? At least to me. So I'm no game artist, no game designer, but just from as a player's perspective, that's my point of view. Now, of course, Dark Souls 2 has a vastly superior navigation system as far as equipment and stuff, in my opinion, compared to Dark Souls 1. Like, inventory is first in Dark Souls 1. You don't have this row column system. It's just basically, you know, row of shit. And they basically did that because the resolution of the normal game engine, if you don't modify it, is running at such a low, it's so low that you have to pretty much have these big blocky icons that take up the entire thing to be able to read shit. So this is a much better system. I hope that this is carried over into Dark Souls 3 because you can find shit so much easier. This is so much less convoluted. You can still see your character. You can see everything you need to see right here. You can access all of this shit now that you have 10 slots is great. I hope you still have 4 ring slots in 3 as well, but we'll see. It wouldn't surprise me if you don't. There's so much more equipment to equip and go through, and it's all easier to see. So I really hope they keep that going. Some of the stuff, not exactly necessary to see at all times, but I do like seeing it. And be able to access all the options and stuff is easier. So I hope they carry that over, but I'm just not crazy about how the current interface looks. But, you know, if it drives me too mad, I'm sure there will be PC mods available very soon after the game's released to fix that issue. So it's not end of the world, and they certainly had mods for this game that made it to where it looked like Dark Souls 1 HUD and stuff. So Not world shattering, but just, you know, my 2 cents on that particular art style change. As far as Bloodborne engine goes, I'm excited about the change, except for one thing. I'm unsure of the performance. So Dark Souls 1 was an absolute garbage PC port. I'm sure most of you know if you play the original Dark Souls 1 on PC. And even those of us, myself included, who played Dark Souls 1 either for the first time or just at all on Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 knows that it did not run great on that either. Even at a stunted 1024 by 720p resolution, which is not actual HD. That's HD minus a few vertical rows. That's like 4:3 resolution stretched to 16:9. It did not, you know, translate very well onto even that generation of consoles at 2011, which was pretty bad. Dark Souls 2 was a much better port on both PC and Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. Looked a lot better, ran a lot better, even though I feel like some of the lighting maybe was not as complex and stuff, but either way, it was a much more serviceable port. The original PC release was extremely fucked because From had not even planned on bringing it to PC. A lot of Japanese developers are like that. In Japan, there's pretty much like 2 or 3 places people play games on. Mobile gaming is starting to pick up a little bit, and other than that, it's PlayStation and Nintendo consoles. That's it. Xbox One, Xbox 360, Xbox Original, they all have sold like shit in Japan, as one would imagine, because it's American consoles, competing with 2 Japanese consoles, and PC is just kind of unheard of down there as well. So they hadn't really planned on even bringing it to console, or from console to PC whatsoever. So because they did get enough petition people to bring it to PC, the port was absolutely bare minimum garbage. Ran at the same thing locked on PC. So it was 720p, not even 720p, 30 frames per second locked. So a masterful modder had to go in with a fix called Dark Souls Fix that made it to where you could run it at 60 frames per second. No higher, I don't think, but better than 30. And Made it to where you can run it at pretty much whatever resolution you desire. Currently running mine at like twice 1080p, which is 1527, whatever I'm running this at as well. So they kind of learned from their mistakes on Dark Souls 2, which is good, except they've still tied the engine tick rate to frame rate, meaning that stuff that is, you know, important, like weapon degradation, maybe even parrying, I don't know, but things that, you know, would be counting engine time passed is tied to frame rate. So for the longest time, we were fucked as PC players because our equipment would degrade twice as fast if you're playing on 60 frames per second versus 30, and maybe even parrying was harder because of you're putting the same amount of frames in half the time, and if they tied parrying to the same frame rate, perhaps it was the same. I don't know, but regardless, they had a lot of growing pains going from console to PC, and it was just honestly resulting from lazy game design. I'm not saying I could do it any better, but you have plenty of other developers that are doing it better, so they should probably take cues from that. And there's a lot of reports that the Bloodborne engine is not fixed a lot of that type of thing, and because it looks a lot better, it's a lot more demanding. I don't know if there's much more AI type thing going on in the background, but it looks a lot better, and it already causes frame drops on PlayStation 3 at 1080p, 30 frames per second. So it goes from like 30 to 20 in some areas. Sometimes it'll drop down to that for a split second. Sometimes it'll chug along at 15 frames per second in some really dense areas. It just kind of depends, which is super not good. 30 frames per second to some people is playable. It's no longer playable to me, especially on this type of game where it's so twitchy and stuff. But going from a inconsistent 30 down to like 15, that is unplayable. I don't care who you are. So that's not good news. And because it's already that much more demanding on a title that came out last year, it's some of the stuff is like dropping and that sort of thing is happening at even worse rates on Dark Souls 3 on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One at that. So they had to lower the resolution from 1080p to 900p on Xbox One. Not that it's super noticeable if you're playing on a TV, but it's kind of sad that these current generation consoles can't even hit that on a fucking Dark Souls title. So I have my concerns with the PC port because of that. It's my understanding it's going to be still 60 frames per second. There was a lot of concern that it was going to be locked to 30 again. It's high resolution up to 4K if you want. I doubt there's multi-monitor support or anything like that, but one can hope. And I'm sure the maximum settings are going to look about the same as the console version, just as it did for this game. Not that that's a big deal, because it still looks good, but it's just something to keep in mind. Isn't this like a fucking... I don't even know. I don't even remember what the hell this is. Oh, more sublime bone dust. I can't even do anything with that. It really sucks. So from a technical perspective, I'm a little bit concerned, to say the least. I just hope it runs fine. They're recommending a GTX 970, which, for reference, I played this entire game through and through on a GTX 970. No trouble at 2x 1080p, maxed out. So I'm assuming you'll be able to do the same thing on Dark Souls 3, maybe at a slightly lower resolution, but I just don't see how it could be that much more demanding with the way it looks. I mean, if they've been able to make this game run so well, I just don't see how they can't make that one run so well. So I think the specs for the GPU are largely inflated. I bet the CPU requirements, being a quad core, is not so inflated though, because they optimized the game for the multi-core consoles. I'm sure that's the case, so it wouldn't surprise me if that is the thing. But I'm prepared for that personally, and I have overkill specs even for the recommended hardware, so it's not like it will affect me. I just don't want people who have lower end hardware that have always been able to play the Souls game to be punished because they have a 60 range GPU instead of 70 or 80, and I just think that's kind of unfair. But that's my 2 cents on that. Come on, you fucker. There we go. I'm also worried about stability on this and optimization. I'm guessing the optimization ought to be okay. I mean, it was really pretty well done on this game for how good it looked. It certainly runs a lot better than compared to Dark Souls 1 for how it looks. Dark Souls 1 on PC, even after Dark Souls fix and everything, Blacktown still runs like shit. There's some areas in DLC that still run like shit. Not because it's demanding, it's just because it's not utilizing the hardware properly. So I'm sure they've learned most of their mistakes from that in years past. So we'll have to see. More Estus Flask. Vision of Pointless. Pointless. That's too bad. But like I said, hopefully most people will just have an incredible overhead of hardware that it won't even matter that much. We'll see. I have a feeling that it'll be a lot better than Dark Souls 1. I don't think it's going to be as good of a port as Dark Souls 2, just because they put so much emphasis on the current gen consoles. Could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. And that'll just have to be something that we see. The only other thing I hope for Dark Souls 3 is that they allow the damn button binds on the controller to be customized a little more. I've been playing this on an Xbox One controller. I played all the Dark Souls on Xbox One controller, and it works okay, but I don't like the clicky tactile feel for swinging swords. I would much prefer if I could use the trigger on it. That would make more sense to me, because of the difference in the PlayStation controller layout and the difference with Xbox. The way they handle which trigger does which sword does what. So that's my opinion, that they should allow us for a bit more customization. It won't kill me if I have to continue with this, and honestly, I've heard that the new generation Xbox One controllers, the ones that are rolling out with the 3.5 mil aux cord input, is actually supposed to be a little softer bumpers. Are supposed to feel just as tactile, but not such a hard force. So I'm hoping that is the case, and that I can maybe purchase one of those, and I'll feel a little bit more at home. I would be playing with the Dark Souls, or not Dark Souls controller, a Xbox 360 controller if my damn wireless receiver worked for that, but it was a Chinese piece of shit knockoff. See, here's one of the things that was like, oh, we're so edgy. It's a callback to Dark Souls 1. That's supposed to be the Lord Vessel that smashed, or at least it's implied it is. So it's like, yay, cool, you've made some fans happy, but at the end of the day, it's like you've done nothing on your, this game has no merit on its own type of thing. But yeah, that's about it. Otherwise, I can get by with Xbox One, no problem. But I also hope, just like this game, it's optimized a bit more for the Xbox One controller, because Dark Souls 1 just feels kind of clunky with it. It feels like the dead zones don't line up properly and that sort of stuff. So we'll see. I just hope that we're not at a disadvantage because of what input device we use. Also, keyboard and mouse needs to be implemented way more. Like, I would prefer to play any third-person action games with a gamepad, but there are some people who would like to play with a keyboard and mouse. I usually reserve that for first-person shooters myself, but hey, if you want to do that, you should be allowed to. So hopefully they put more attention to that sort of detail as well. And once again, only time will tell. We don't have much time. But as far as I can think of, I believe that's about all I have my wish list for. I hope they go back to their roots with Dark Souls 1 a little bit more. Implement the good things they did that made sense from either a player convenience point of view on this game, or mechanics that really brought the game to a new level. But other than that, I want them to go back to, don't make a clone of Dark Souls 1, keep innovating, but bring us back to real difficulty rather than, bullshit simulated difficulty, which I feel like was a lot of this and here. Bring back that iconic game world design. Bring back a few characters that will actually mean something to someone, a veteran of the old games. I'd love to see either some Easter eggs with Solaire or, Artorias, or even if you could see those characters again because of the distortion of time, that sort of thing. Do it legitimately, not just be like, oh, look, here's the soul from another boss just because we're so edgy. So, but that's about it. I I've enjoyed my time with all the Dark Souls games. I know I'll sink quite a few hours into the new one, and I hope it, doesn't give me a fucking aneurysm like the first time I played through Dark Souls 1. At least it felt like it did. And I hope to see you guys out there as some fellow Sun Bros, and we'll help each other get through that godforsaken game once again. And yeah, I'll surely review the game either by myself or with Ashton if he's available, if he's played enough into it. So stick around for that if you want to see that. And otherwise, thank you guys for joining us once again, especially if you've seen any parts of my old Dark Souls 2 playthrough. And hopefully this will be like one of the last times, if not the last time, we're in Scholar of the First Sin, and we'll move on to bigger and better things with Dark Souls 3. See you later, and thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.